God's Forge. I am Pastor Jason Perry with Patriot Crusader Mission, a church in Johnson City, Tennessee, for veterans, first responders, patriots, and those who support them. So, um, we are on our 18th day into this Bible study, and that means we're on Genesis 18. Genesis 18. There's something I want to talk about first while we wait for people to get on. I know that my time, coming in at the top of the hour or in between, sometime between 10 and 10:15 is a little erratic, and I apologize for that. So let's talk about something else in the news today. Good morning, Michelle. It's always great to see you. So, the saber rattling is getting very loud, and there's talk of U.S. troops being used in Ukraine. And us, I've watched people that I used to respect talk about how we're not doing enough in Ukraine and we're not doing that. Well, last night on the news on Tucker, they showed that the Biden administration is smuggling illegal immigrants, single male, young, full grown adults into our country and dispersing them to the other 50 states or 49 states. And yet here we are. They had the gravitas last night to say that every country, this is the Biden administration, deserves to have sovereign borders. But yeah, we don't protect our own southern border. Here is my line in the sand. I don't think we should protect another single country or go into another single war or spend another single dollar on NATO until we secure our southern border. Why are we willing to send men and borrow billions of dollars and bankrupt our own nation, bankrupting our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, our great-great-grandchildren as we approach 30 trillion in debt, to protect other countries that are not sending money here? They're stealing from us. NATO has stolen from us for decades. Trump was the first person to hold them accountable. And now that we have incompetent Democrats in office again, we're back to being the money bags that fund everyone else. We've crippled our country's energy industry. We were energy independent and we're making money exporting energy. Now we are dependent on everyone else, and that's why gas prices are so high. And it also shows that is Russia's main source of income, is their oil. And Biden approved their big pipeline while shutting down our Keystone. If you can't see that this is a deliberate move by Democrats to destroy our country, right? Destroy our country for their masters in China and elsewhere, then there's not much I can do for you as far as, you're watching the wrong channel. You're watching the wrong channel because you're an enemy in your own country. You're destroying your own country. You are literally a traitor and you don't even know it. So anyways, all right, now let's get into the Bible here. We're on Genesis 18, and there's one thing I want to read to you about infant baptisms. And infant baptisms is a polarizing subject in the Christian community. It doesn't need to be, but churches have split over this. I've been a part of churches who only do dedications, baby dedications. I've been a part of churches that do baptisms, and I've been a part of churches that do both. It depends on what the parent wants. And what they're doing when you do an infant baptism is you're straddling the Old and the New Testament. So I want to read a little article that's in my Bible here, my study Bible, about infant baptism to bring some clarity to this issue to you guys. Though infant baptism has been a majority practice of historic Christianity, its propriety has been solemnly challenged by godly Christians of various denominations. The question surrounding infant baptism rests upon several concerns. The New Testament neither explicitly commands infants to be baptized nor explicitly prohibits them from being baptized. The debate centers on questions surrounding the meaning of baptism and the degree of continuity between the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. The most crucial objection from those who oppose infant baptism is that the sacrament of baptism belongs to members of the church, and the church is a company of believers. Since infants are incapable of exercising faith, they ought not be baptized. It is also stressed that the baptisms recorded in the New Testament, there are no specific references to infants. A further objection is that the Old Covenant, though not conveying salvation via biological bloodlines, nevertheless did involve an ethnic emphasis on the nation of Israel. The covenant was passed through family and through national ties. In the New Testament, the covenant is more inclusive, allowing Gentiles into the community of faith. This point of discontinuity makes a difference between circumcision and baptism. On the other hand, those who favor infant baptism stress its parallels with circumcision. Though baptism and circumcision are not identical, they have crucial points in common. Both are signs of the covenant, and both are signs of faith. In the case of Abraham, he came to faith as an adult. He made a profession of faith before he was circumcised. He had faith before he received the sign of that faith. He had faith before he received the sign of that faith. Abraham's son Isaac, on the other hand, received the sign of his faith before he had faith that the sign signified, as was the case with all future children of the covenant. The crucial point is that the Old Testament God ordered that a sign of faith be given before faith was present, since that this was clearly the case. It is erroneous to argue in principle that it is wrong to administer a sign of faith before faith is present. It is also important to notice that the narrative record of baptisms in the New Testament are of adults who were previously unbelievers. They were first-generation Christians. Again, it has always been the rule that adult converts who are not children of believers at that time of their infancy must first make a profession of faith before receiving baptism, which is a sign of their faith. About 1/4 of the baptisms mentioned in the New Testament indicate that the entire households were baptized. This strongly suggests, though it does not prove, that infants were included among those baptized. Since the New Testament does not explicitly exclude infants from the covenant sign, and they had been included for thousands of years while the covenant sign was circumcision, it would naturally be assumed in the early church that infants were to be given the sign of the covenant. History bears witness to this assumption. The first direct method of infant baptism is around the middle of the 2nd century AD. What is noteworthy about this reference is that it assumes infant baptism to be a universal practice of the church. If infant baptism were not the practice of first century church, how and why did this departure from orthodoxy happen so fast and so pervasively? Not only was the spread rapid and universal, the extant literature from that time does not reflect any controversy concerning this issue. In general, the New Covenant is more inclusive than the Old Covenant. Yet those who dispute the validity of infant baptism make it less inclusive with respect to children, despite the absence of any biblical prohibition against infant baptism. Awesome. Congratulations, Michelle. Good morning, Claudia. So I'm for infant baptism. If you haven't guessed, it really is up to the parents, in my opinion. It's not worth dividing over. Um, you know, I don't think that. I think that that article really drives it home and states that it was the assumed practice, and then we added a barrier to come to faith. So, all right, now let's get into Genesis 18. Okay. Good morning, madam. And the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre, and he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, three men were standing in front of him. When he saw them, he ran to the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, O Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree, while I bring a morsel of bread that you may refresh yourselves, and after you may pass on. Since you have come to your servant, since you have come to your servant. So they said, Do as you have said. And Abraham went quickly into the tent to Sarah and said, Quick, 3 seahs of fine flour, knead it and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a young man who prepared it quickly. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, Where is Sarah, your wife? And he said, She is in the tent. The Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, I am worn out. My Lord is old. Shall I have pleasure? That the Lord said to Abram, why did Sarah laugh and say, Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? In the appointed time I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. He said, No, but you did laugh. Then the men set out from there, and they looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to set them on their way. And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations on earth shall be blessed in him. For I have chosen him that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him. And the Lord said, Because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave, I will go down and see what they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me. And if not, I will know. So the men turned, and from there they went toward Sodom. But Abraham still stood before the Lord. Then Abram drew up near and said, Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Surely there are 50 righteous within that city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? And the Lord said, If I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake. Abram answered and said, Behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord. I who am but dust and ashes. Suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for the lack of 5? And he said, I will destroy it if I find 45 there. Again he spoke and said to him, Suppose 40 are found there. He answered, For the sake of 40, I will not do it. Then he said, Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 are found there. He answered, I will not do it if I find 30 there. He said, Behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there, he answered. For the sake of 20, I will not destroy it. Then he said, Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak again but this once. Suppose 10 are found there, he answered. For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. And the Lord went his way when he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. So, hey, good morning, Brandy. So there's some things here to talk about. One, who were the three people? Some people have theorized that it was God, Jesus, and an angel, or the Holy Spirit. Others, who I think have it more correctly, say it was the Father as well as two angels. And I think that it suggests that it advances in the story that it was God and two angels, the two angels that ended up going into the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, and then the Sodomites who came to try to rape them. We'll get into that story here in a little bit. So there's a lot of people who believe, and I'm one of them, that that the Lord is not going to sweep up the just with the unjust, and that's why America and why we've been given so much time to turn back to the Lord, right? Obviously, the LGBTQ agenda is a very specific, heinous crime that the Lord has called fire from the sky to destroy two cities. Those same crimes are some of the same crimes that he used to wipe every living, thing off the face of the planet. The difference is that the church is still here. The church is amongst us. And there we have way more than 10, way more than 100, way more than 1,000, right? More than 10,000. I don't know what the number is of godly, God-fearing people, but there are a lot of us here. And time after time in the voting booth, evangelicals have shown up and pulled the lever and saved us from certain destruction. And we are coming into a election year. And during every one, when it makes sense during these morning things, I'm going to be talking about issues so that we understand what's godly versus ungodly. During the early stages of our country, voting was done in the church. And on voting day, the pastor gave a voting day sermon and educated on the congregation on what was godly about the issues and which issues were ungodly, which candidate was godly and which was ungodly, and advised them how to vote. And this was the practice for a very long time in America. And then the secularists knew that they would never win with that being the standard. They started with this false narrative of separation of church and state, which is a lie from the pit of hell. It was always meant that the government was going to stay out of the church, not the church out of the government. So Brandy said here, what the Lord will do just for one person. JP, our nation is very wicked. Would the Lord remove COVID-19 from our nation? Should he? I don't think that COVID is going anywhere. I think it's going to be just like every other virus, the millions of viruses that are on the earth right now. I think that COVID versions of COVID have been around since the beginning of time. I think that this was made in a Chinese lab. I think if you watched Bret Baier yesterday, you will see that the paper trail and they all knew that this was from the lab in the beginning, and that Fauci bought off the dissenting opinions, because Fauci obviously would be implicated in the Chinese lab theory, so that he bought off these other scientists with massive 10, 7 million, 5 million grants to their organizations to get them to flip to it was naturally formed. But last night was a bombshell on Brett Baer last night on Fox. It was the timeline and the paper trail and the emails, and it was very, very, very compelling. But my whole point is that we all have to start understanding that everything we do matters. For example, when yesterday or the other day, I went to Lowe's to buy flooring for this place. And Lowe's and Home Depot are exactly the same distance away from me. I chose to go to Lowe's, which is an attack against Home Depot, right? Because I'm literally taking my money and I'm supporting their number one competitor, and am doing that, right? I'm choosing to spend my money with Lowe's at that point, which is where I have been going for all my stuff, because I have, up until now, again, they're a corporation that is doing very well during the pandemic, but I felt like they were more in line with my values than Home Depot is. All right. Because of the veteran discount and a lot of the things that they do there. And, I've always felt like they were more pro-America. The fact that I have more options to buy American products in there at a higher price, but at least they're giving me options where it makes sense. My tape measure, and I'll show you. I was able to buy a made in the USA Craftsman tape measure. Now, I could have bought a cheaper one, but I chose to buy this one. Now, there are times that I can't afford the American product. That's okay. But when you can, you should be supporting American companies, and you should be supporting Christian companies. We have to spend our resources, right? We have a finite amount of resources in our community. We have our time, which is the most important. So what we spend our time doing and who we spend our time with is most important. And what we are watching is a part of that. Where we spend our dollars. We need to spend our dollars in our small town communities, supporting small businesses, Christian-owned businesses. Right? We're terrible about giving money to people who hate us. We do it all the time instead of going to somewhere where we know that they support our values, that they support life, that they are, that they are lights in this world. Okay. And then your influence is another one. And I talked about this on my rant the other day for the NFL and pro sports and whatnot. Your influence should be spent, trying to bring people to Christianity, not anything else, So again, as we fix their heart, right, as we introduce them to the Lord and the Lord works on their heart, the rest of the issues will come through. So that's all I have for you today. God bless you. I will see you. For those of you who are going to tune in today on the Hope Report, we have the author from 23 Minutes in Hell, a guy who went to hell for 23 minutes. He is a brilliant man. Everything he says is grounded in scripture. I really recommend you watch today's episode on the Hope Report at 1 p.m. God bless you. See you then.